Among bladed weapon aficionados, one of the most easily recognized knife types, maybe short sword types, in the world is the Kukri. We're looking at an example held by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We're going to look today at an odd and interesting offshoot of this. By the way, this video is made in deepest thanks to Peter McQuillan, who helped me produce my most recent book, seen here, Deadly Ingenuity, a history of unusual weapons from around the world and across time. Here's another example of our knife type from the Met, and these are, for good reason, inseparable in the imagination from the country of Nepal and the Gurkhas, these being the signature warriors from Nepal, and you think of them and their kukris as you do samurais and their katanas. And as we can see in the next two images, modern soldiers from Nepal are proud of their fighting history and their fighting knife. There are many famous instances of its use in modern war. Here's an excerpt from a very recent one, since it involves capturing ISIS fighters. In this picture from an old 1984 Black Belt magazine edition, we see a World War II photo which shows one clearly being carried in that conflict. Let's quote from the article. Perhaps the most famous story of a kukri-wielding Gurkha came out of the 1943 Tunisian campaign. An Indian Army Gurkha on night patrol stumbled across a German trench. As he put it, "I recognize him, the German soldier, by his helmet. He was fumbling with his weapon, so I cut off his head with my kukri. Another appeared from a slit trench, and I cut him down also. I was able to do the same with two others, but one made a great deal of noise, which raised the alarm. I had a cut at the fifth, but I am afraid I only wounded him. Yet perhaps the wound was severe, for I struck him between the neck and the shoulders." You might have noticed in that story, Gurkhas aren't strictly just from Nepal. That's where they're most famous from, if you will. And as touched at in the second part of this definition here, they became world famous via their incorporation into the British Armed Forces. Nepalese ones in particular. And let's read from an official British Army webpage. Anglo-Nepali War, 1814 to 1816. Years of Gurkha incursions into northern India led to a declaration of war on Nepal by the British East India Company in November 1814. It was a strange war for the time, with both sides behaving honorably, controlling looting and respecting non-combatants. Technology favored the British, the terrain the Gurkhas. A mutual respect developed, and when the war ended with the Treaty of Seguali in 1816, both sides decided that they would be better as friends rather than enemies, and from that point, Gurkha regiments began to be raised as part of the East India Company's army. I'll grant you that sounds a little bit whitewashed history-wise, but we get the point, and it's useful information. So let's read from another page from the same official site. The Brigade of Gurkhas is a unique organization in the British Army with a reputation of being amongst the finest and most feared soldiers in the world. Let's skip ahead a little. All Gurkhas are recruited from Nepal, with many thousands of young people attempting selection every year for only a few hundred opportunities. And as a lot of our images have shown, including this one, the Kukri has not gone anywhere while this centuries-long partnership has continued. Not to mention just the overall Nepali martial arts tradition. Anyone who knows anything about knives can look at a kukri, even if they never knew what one was, and tell right away it's a blade well suited for chopping. The forward lean of the recurved blade, the swelling towards the top. You can use it to stab, as we can tell just from this picture here, definitely, but it's at its most fearsome when you're swinging. And now let's get to today's antique weapon, because what it is rather odd, right? It's a bayonet that's based on a swinging, slashing, chopping weapon. Yes, that's my hand, and a bayonet is of course a weapon that's really ideally a thrusting weapon because it's stuck onto the end of a long rifle. You're generally trying to turn your rifle into a spear, not a glaive. But what kind of a bayonet are you going to want when this weapon is as culturally important as the following quotation indicates? This is from kukriblades.com. The kukri is the national as well as the religious weapon of the Gurkhas. It is incumbent on a Gurkha to carry it while awake and to place it under pillow when retiring. So said a Maharaja whose name I am not going to butcher by attempting to read. And it's easy then to see how you end up with an item like ours today, even though it's kind of an odd choice for a bayonet. Or is it? Or is it as odd as we think? First, let's take a better look. So yeah, obviously a socket bayonet combined with a kukri, but long before socket bayonets, there were the originals, plug bayonets like this one. Boy, I'm pretty sure I did a video on an antique plug bayonet on this channel a long time ago. Some say the first bayonets appeared in France during the 1640s, others in China before that, but not too much before that. We are not here to hash all that out. But as I'm sure most of you know, the problem with a plug bayonet, it certainly served the purpose. Great, I now have a spear. One, it takes a preparatory action, and two, it actually blocks the barrel of your firearm. And so it's no surprise that eventually they came up with a way to have a bayonet that had the positive we wanted for soldiers without some of the negatives. I say some because it depended on the exact configuration, right? There was more than one in the evolution. And of course, bayonets became a mainstay part of warfare. They really kind of spurred their own martial art in a way too, which is bayonet fighting. And there are all kinds of old great sources, as you can see, on fighting, bayonet to bayonet, unarmed versus bayonet. And the thing is, in that martial art, or some versions of it, there were swings, slashes. It wasn't just the pig sticker technique. Because for a variety of reasons, there were other broad-bladed weapons like these, not as broad-bladed as our kukri, but other broad-bladed weapons attached to rifles. And if the blade at the end of your rifle is suited towards swinging and thrusting, of course you want to be able to do either. So let me quote here from a U.S. Marines source. The movement is a slashing motion, so the blade cuts across the opponent's neck. And so in the case of that particular technique, you are using your rifle as a glaive. And let's get back to our item, a couple more reviews as we close things out. Boy, that is a sturdy blade, that's for sure. And part of that is that kukris are a multi-use tool. They were used for chopping wood, cutting meat, all kinds of things, not just fighting. Once again, this video was made for Peter. Thanks for your support, and I hope that you have never seen one of these before. And thanks, everyone.